Have you ever woken up to a social media post so explosive it could shake the very foundation of your life? That's exactly what happened to Isabella Lancaster one morning when she scrolled through her notifications and saw a brazen message from a woman claiming she was carrying her husband's child. Overnight, the Lancaster family's shining reputation cracked open to reveal hidden affairs, secret allies, and betrayals that would eclipse any high society scandal. Prepare yourself for a story so filled with twists, heartbreak, and legal drama that you'll question where loyalty ends and obsession begins. This is a tale of power, passion, and one DNA test that could change everything. Isabella Lancaster's morning routine was simple: a gentle stretch in bed, a warm shower with lavender-scented soap, and a cup of peppermint tea while she checked the news on her phone. It was a pattern that soothed her, especially as she navigated the uneasy waters of her pregnancy. After all, carrying the heir to the Lancaster fortune was no small burden. Robert Lancaster, her husband, came from old money fortune, minted by generations of successful shipping magnates and real estate moguls in the family. Yet behind the veneer of impeccable wealth and philanthropic gestures, Isabella had long harbored a nagging feeling of unease. That morning, she settled into the overstuffed armchair by the bay window, the sunlight illuminating her white satin nightgown. She scrolled through her notifications casually. Suddenly, she froze. A bombshell post on a gossip forum read, "His baby is mine. Robert Lancaster." The username attached to a glamorous profile photo belonged to one Catherine Devereaux, an up-and-coming model who'd been seen at various charity galas around New York City. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She'd had suspicions about her husband's irregular business trips, but never any proof, until now. Shaken to her core, she reached for her phone to call Robert. Across town, Robert Lancaster was just stepping out of an early morning meeting when his personal phone buzzed repeatedly. His staff at Lancaster Global Holdings had been celebrating a major merger victory, but the look on his face shifted from triumph to dread the moment he read Isabella's frantic messages. The text was short and sharp. "Call me. Now." He retreated into his private office, a space filled with polished mahogany furniture and centuries-old oil paintings of his ancestors. The hush of the room offered no comfort. Though Robert had been raised to maintain a stoic facade, Lancaster's never showed panic. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. For weeks, he'd been on edge. Catherine Devereaux had threatened to go public if he didn't leave Isabella. At first, he'd brushed off her threats as melodrama. But the catastrophic reality now stared him in the face. Catherine had executed her plan in the most humiliating way possible on social media. He exhaled slowly, dialing Isabella. When she answered, her voice quavered in a way he'd never heard before. She demanded an immediate explanation. Robert closed his eyes, wishing he could magically undo the last few months. But the story was out, and it was time for the Lancaster name to face the fire. Before confronting Robert in person, Isabella stood in their marble-floored hallway, taking deep breaths to steady herself. Priceless art and an ornate chandelier seemed to mock her tangible reminders of a life she might have to leave behind. If this scandal was true, she thought of her unborn child, her top priority, no matter what. Her mind drifted to how the Lancasters had built their empire over generations. Robert's great-grandfather, Ernest Lancaster, had owned a fleet of cargo ships that crisscrossed the Atlantic in the early 1900s. Over time, the family's fortunes expanded into construction and later high-end real estate developments. Their name graced parks, university buildings, and hospitals. Their philanthropic efforts, like the Lancaster Cancer Wing at Mount Sinai, were legendary. Isabella had always taken pride in carrying such an esteemed surname. She came from a respectable but not obscenely wealthy background. Her father was a retired academic and her mother a piano teacher in Boston. When she married Robert, it felt like stepping into another world. Yet she'd quickly learned that with wealth came a labyrinth of social expectations, secrets, and hush-hush arrangements. Now, as Robert walked through the front door, she braced herself for a conversation that might unravel the perfect tapestry of their life. Before Robert could get a word in, Isabella's friend and confidant Lucy Moretti burst in through the open door. Lucy was a tenacious journalist for a financial magazine, known for her fierce loyalty to Isabella and her unrelenting pursuit of truth. She'd just seen the post from Catherine Devereux. "Isabella, I came as soon as I heard," Lucy said, placing a supportive hand on her friend's shoulder. She shot Robert a glare that might have withered a lesser man. "We need answers." Robert, struggling to keep composure, swore that Catherine was just a fling, an accident, some brief mistake that had spiraled out of control. But Lucy pressed him. "Have you seen the post, Robert? She's telling the world you're the father of her child. Our question is, are you—" As the tension in the room soared, Isabella felt an unexpected wave of relief having Lucy there. Lucy had a knack for slicing through half-truths with surgical precision. Meanwhile, Robert insisted that Catherine's child couldn't possibly be his. He called her post a desperate attempt for clout and money. Isabella swallowed hard. She realized that no matter which story was true, her life would never be the same. The baby she carried was 6 months along, and she worried about the stress on her unborn child. But she knew she had to face the truth, no matter how harrowing. On the other side of town, Catherine Devereux lounged in her plush apartment, sipping a green smoothie. Her phone pinged endlessly with notifications, likes, shares, and messages from curious strangers, tabloids, and gossip hounds. She tapped a manicured nail against the screen, a small smirk lighting her face. This was the sort of publicity she'd always dreamed of, albeit for reasons she wouldn't admit openly. Catherine was a small-town girl from Charleston who'd moved to New York to chase the runway dream. She'd caught Robert's eye at a charity gala for the American Heart Association. Their flirtation had started innocently enough, a little too much champagne, a moonlit balcony chat, lingering glances. One thing led to another, and soon Catherine found herself in a secret arrangement. Initially, Robert had showered her with expensive gifts, private dinners, and whispered promises to work things out in his marriage. But as time wore on, Catherine realized she was just a side note to the well-orchestrated Lancaster life, an ornament quickly discarded when inconvenient. The final straw was discovering she was pregnant. When she told Robert, he'd urged her to handle it discreetly. Hurt and furious, she decided if she couldn't have him to herself, she'd at least blow up his carefully constructed world. When Catherine posted "His baby is mine" on her Instagram and linked it to a tabloid gossip forum, she knew it would generate buzz. But the tsunami of attention exceeded her wildest hopes. Within hours, her face was splashed across trending hashtags and paparazzi staked out her building. The subsequent swirl of media forced Robert's PR team into crisis mode. They even reached out to Mark Geragos, one of the country's most recognizable attorneys, known for high-profile celebrity cases, to discuss potential defamation suits. But the challenge was that Catherine wasn't a random troll. She had phone records, text messages, and photos that proved her intimate connection to Robert Lancaster. Robert's team tried to spin the narrative, calling Catherine a model-turned-extortionist, but Catherine countered by threatening to release more incriminating details if they didn't back off. Meanwhile, the Lancaster family's philanthropic events and partnerships were jeopardized. Big names like Mark Cuban, whom they had recently partnered with for a literacy initiative, quietly began distancing themselves from the scandal. As the world watched, Isabella found herself in an excruciating spotlight. Was her unborn child being overshadowed by a mistress's claims, and could all of this noise harm the baby's health? She felt cornered, outraged, and determined to fight back. In the dimly lit study of the Lancaster estate, Isabella confronted Robert with an ultimatum. Her voice trembled less from fear, more from pent-up fury. "Either you handle this situation by tomorrow, or I will," she declared. Robert, who for so long had been the confident patriarch in training, found himself at a loss. He was torn between saving his marriage and placating Catherine so she wouldn't reveal more embarrassing secrets. The financial empire he was set to inherit teetered on a delicate balance. Any more negative press could derail ongoing deals. When Lucy Moretti joined them, armed with a laptop showing the skyrocketing social media coverage, Robert realized how dire things had become. Every tabloid, every morning show, Lucy paused, letting the data speak for itself. This is a 5-alarm fire. In that moment, Isabella decided she needed to protect herself and her baby first. Wiping away tears, she told Robert that she was moving out temporarily to stay at a penthouse suite the family owned in a quieter part of the city. She would surround herself with supportive friends like Lucy. Robert made a feeble attempt to stop her, but she was already walking away, determined to shield her unborn child from the chaos. Isabella's parents, Joseph and Marianne Summers, arrived the next day. They flew in from Boston the moment they heard the news. Marianne, a gentle soul with a strong moral compass, found herself furious, an emotion she rarely displayed. Joseph, a retired literature professor, offered quiet but firm support, his eyes reflecting concern for his daughter's well-being. They met Isabella at the penthouse suite, a lavishly furnished safe haven away from prying reporters. Marianne immediately noted the stress on Isabella's face. "You need rest, sweetheart," she insisted, placing a hand on her daughter's belly. "Your health and the baby come first." Joseph, ever the academic, urged caution. "Don't let this media circus run your life. Gather facts. Use evidence." He handed Isabella a folder full of articles about legal rights, paternal claims, and real-life precedents. In that folder was also the name of a powerful law firm, Friedman and Friedman, known for representing high-profile clients discreetly. "If you need a court order, you might consider them," Joseph suggested gently. Isabella nodded. She appreciated her parents' support, but knew she had to confront her husband again, this time armed with more than tears and anger. She would demand a legal test to prove or disprove Catherine's claims once and for all. Meanwhile, Robert felt the weight of 1,000 obligations closing in on him. The board members at Lancaster Global Holdings demanded damage control. Their overseas partners were skittish, and stocks had dipped amid swirling rumors. His mother, the dignified Eloise Lancaster, summoned him to the family's ancestral home to discuss the stain on the Lancaster name. Eloise, perched on a velvet sofa, radiated disapproval. "We Lancasters are not just any family," she reminded him sternly. "We've thrived for over a century on impeccable reputations. You must fix this." Robert realized that his personal failings were now a matter of family honor. He'd grown up understanding that the Lancasters, for all their philanthropic grace, were fiercely protective of their image. One misstep could unravel decades of prestige. He stared at the ornate portrait of his late father, Jonathan Lancaster, who had passed away unexpectedly 2 years prior. Jonathan had entrusted Robert with the keys to the kingdom. Could Robert salvage his father's legacy from this scandal? Desperate, he considered meeting Catherine face to face. He hoped he could reason with her, maybe offer a settlement. But a pit in his stomach warned him that Catherine had tasted the power of public attention. Convincing her to stand down might be near impossible. The next day, Robert arranged a clandestine meeting with Catherine at a private restaurant booth in Midtown Manhattan. He chose a corner table, where prying eyes couldn't easily eavesdrop. She arrived in a flowing designer dress, her posture poised and confident. Gone was the small-town girl he'd once met. In her place stood a woman determined to claim her share of the spotlight. Robert began forcing himself to keep his tone level. "We need to talk about the damage this is causing." She folded her arms, unyielding. "The damage you caused, you mean?" He slid a thick envelope across the table, an initial settlement offer. "If money is what you want." Her eyes flashed, and she interrupted him. "So that's it. I vanish for a paycheck. What about the baby?" Robert swallowed, trying not to flinch. "I'm willing to provide financial support if the child is mine. But we need to do this quietly. No more social media stunts." Catherine scoffed. "You don't get to dictate terms anymore." She tossed her hair back, leaning in. "If you think a lump sum and hush money will solve this, you're dumber than I thought. This is my child. I'm not going away." Robert left the meeting feeling more trapped than ever. Back at the penthouse, Isabella felt her baby's first strong kick, a bittersweet reminder that amid all the chaos, new life was forming inside her. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, tears welling in her eyes. In these moments, she was determined to shield her child from the stress swirling around them. She confided her fears to Lucy and her mother. "What if this drama threatens my health? What if the stress hurts the baby?" She had read stories about preterm labor triggered by emotional turmoil. Lucy, ever the practical, rock assured her, "You're doing the best you can. You're removing yourself from toxic stress." Marianne joined the conversation, encouraging Isabella to focus on wellness, taking walks, meditating, seeing a prenatal counselor. Isabella reluctantly agreed. Her father's suggestion of Friedman and Friedman still hung in the air. Was it too aggressive a step, or was it exactly what she needed? As she sipped her herbal tea, Isabella decided to call Friedman and Friedman the next day. Her unborn child was the priority. If Catherine's claims turned out false, she needed to expose them. If they were true, well, Isabella couldn't yet face that possibility. But she knew she had to be prepared for any outcome. Across town, Catherine reveled in the attention her social media posts were garnering. She posted cryptic updates, including photos of her silhouette with a baby bump, fueling curiosity among her growing number of followers. Commenters speculated about everything, from the child's paternity to whether Catherine was after the Lancaster fortune. Some lavished her with support for exposing a cheating millionaire, while others called her a gold digger. Her direct messages were flooded with interview requests from tabloids and talk shows. Everyone wanted the inside scoop. Catherine carefully chose which offers to accept, aiming to keep the media frenzy alive while protecting herself from any legal blowback. Though she seemed confident online, she wrestled with private doubts. There was a nagging fear. What if the court-ordered DNA test, if it came to that, revealed she'd acted too soon? But that fear was overshadowed by her anger toward Robert, who had once promised her the world only to retreat back to his perfectly choreographed life. Still, each night, she couldn't shake the question, was she really carrying Robert's child? The timing pointed to him, but she had gone on a brief trip to Miami, where she'd reconnected with an old flame. For now, she suppressed that memory, focusing on the spectacle she had orchestrated. While public opinion roiled, Isabella began experiencing complications. After a routine checkup at Cedars-Sinai, her OB/GYN noticed her elevated blood pressure and increasing anxiety levels. The doctor recommended rest and possible medication to stabilize her condition, warning that extreme stress could lead to preeclampsia. Overwhelmed, Isabella clung to her mother's hand as they waited for test results. The hospital's humming fluorescent lights seemed to highlight the gravity of her situation. She realized that her baby's health was being jeopardized by the swirling scandal. This realization fueled her determination to take action. That very evening, she contacted Friedman and Friedman. She spoke with Linda Winters, a seasoned attorney known for her expertise in high-profile paternity disputes. Linda listened intently as Isabella explained the situation, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions. By the end of the call, Linda recommended a clear course of action, a petition to the court for a DNA test that would force Catherine to produce evidence of the child's paternity. Isabella's hands trembled as she hung up the phone. This legal route would either vindicate her husband or confirm the ultimate betrayal. Yet she felt oddly at peace. Finally, she had a plan to cut through the social media noise and find the truth. The next morning, a flurry of legal paperwork landed at Catherine's doorstep. Friedman and Friedman had moved swiftly, filing a motion for a paternity test. Catherine stared at the documents, her expression unreadable. The media spin she'd orchestrated had always risked leading to this point, but she hadn't expected it so soon. She called her own newly retained attorney, an ambitious young litigator named Bryce Cromwell. Bryce had his own motivations for taking on a case that could catapult him into the limelight. Yet even he cautioned Catherine about the risks of refusing the DNA test. It would look suspicious in the public eye. Catherine decided she wouldn't back down. She instructed Bryce to proceed. Publicly, she declared she had nothing to hide, writing on Instagram, "I welcome the truth, unlike certain families who thrive on secrets." The post went viral within hours, garnering thousands of supportive comments and just as many scathing critiques. In the boardrooms of Lancaster Global Holdings, Robert braced himself for the storm. If the test proved Catherine's claim, his personal downfall would be unimaginable. If the test vindicated him, he might salvage his marriage. He could almost hear his father's voice reminding him that the Lancaster legacy rested on the next heir and the next headline. Linda Winters, a poised, silver-haired attorney with a reputation for both compassion and cutthroat strategy, visited Isabella at the penthouse. She brought along a junior associate, Jacob Wells, to discuss the paternity test logistics. As they spoke, Linda also shared some case studies referencing real legal battles similar to Isabella's situation. One was the well-documented case of Steve Bing versus Elizabeth Hurley, which had hinged on DNA evidence and a swirl of public speculation. Linda made it clear that once they had the test results, they could pursue a defamation lawsuit against Catherine if the child wasn't Robert's. Or, if the child was indeed Robert's, they'd negotiate custody and financial arrangements. Isabella nodded, absorbing the options as Lucy jotted down notes. When Linda asked how Isabella wished to proceed if the baby turned out to be Robert's, Isabella looked away, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I love my husband, but I can't raise a child overshadowed by a public scandal." "And what about my own baby?" Linda placed a comforting hand on Isabella's arm. "First, let's get the facts. Then we'll chart a course that prioritizes your mental health, your child, and your financial security." one step at a time. In a rare moment of solitude, Robert found himself in the Lancaster family chapel, a small ornate room tucked away in their estate. Flickering votive candles cast dancing shadows across the marble floor. He hadn't prayed in years, but the weight of the situation drew him there. He knelt, clasping his hands, tightly, eyes shut. Memories of his father's guidance flooded his mind, the lessons on leadership, the emphasis on family duty, the constant refrain that Lancasters never let their emotions derail their legacy. Yet Robert had let his passions lead him astray. He felt a wave of regret, not just for the scandal, but for betraying Isabella and jeopardizing their unborn child's peaceful entry into the world. He whispered an apology to the silence, unsure if it was meant for God, his father, or the woman he had married. After a long pause, he resolved that if the DNA test proved Catherine was lying, he would dedicate himself to reconciling with Isabella. If it proved she was telling the truth, well, he'd face those consequences head-on. He rose, straightened his suit jacket, and walked out of the chapel feeling a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he could salvage something from the wreckage. Isabella spent hours scrolling through old photos on her phone, vacations with Robert, lavish parties, quiet moments curled up on the sofa. Their smiles looked so genuine back then. She recalled how he'd proposed on a yacht near Nantucket, kneeling under a canopy of stars. In those early days, she believed their love was unbreakable, yet time and distance had crept in. Robert's business grew more demanding, and she'd begun noticing small changes, late-night calls, secretive texts, an emotional distance that felt almost palpable. She'd confronted him multiple times, only to receive reassuring words or expensive gifts that temporarily eased her suspicions. Now each memory was tinged with doubt. Had he been planning secret rendezvous with Catherine all along? Had their marriage been a facade for appearances, especially given the family's powerful name? A sudden jolt from her baby snapped her out of the past. She rubbed her belly tenderly, whispering a promise, "I'll protect you, no matter what." The time for ignorance was over. She had to face whatever truth the DNA test revealed. Tapping a quick message to Lucy, she asked her to help schedule the final details of the court-ordered procedure. It was time to bring facts into the light. The day of the DNA test arrived like an ominous cloud looming over everyone involved. Isabella and Robert arrived first at the private clinic Friedman and Friedman had arranged. There were no paparazzi outside. The law firm had taken meticulous steps to ensure privacy. Inside, the sterile white walls and the faint scent of antiseptic set a somber tone. Catherine arrived with her attorney, Bryce Cromwell. She wore oversized sunglasses and carried herself with a triumphant air, yet she couldn't entirely mask the flicker of nervous tension in her posture. After all the bold declarations, the moment of truth was here. The medical staff meticulously performed the cheek swabs, Robert's sample, Catherine's sample, and a test to confirm her pregnancy. The entire procedure took only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. Isabella stayed at Robert's side, her hand resting protectively over her own abdomen. She was 7 months pregnant now, and the physical demands of carrying a child had become entwined with the emotional toll of the scandal. Catherine's attorney insisted they'd also demand Robert's presence at a prenatal test in the future to confirm if the unborn child was truly his. The tension in the waiting room was palpable, everyone aware that in a matter of days, science would settle the dispute that had shaken their world. In the days following the test, Catherine attempted to keep her social media momentum alive. She posted sultry photos, hinted at big revelations, and teased her audience with cryptic statements like, "Soon everyone will know what really happened." She seemed to thrive on the public's fascination, soaking up every comment and speculation. Behind the scenes, however, her attorney Bryce Cromwell advised her to tone it down. "If the test results go against us, the courts will see your behavior as malicious," he warned. Catherine dismissed his concern. "It won't come to that," she retorted, fighting off an anxious quiver in her voice. Meanwhile, Isabella felt her nerves fraying. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw headlines about the results, public humiliation, and the possible destruction of her marriage. Lucy urged her to step away from social media and focus on self-care, prenatal yoga reading, anything to keep her mind at ease. Isabella tried, but the ticking clock in her head refused to quiet down. Robert, too, was on edge. He met with his accountants to brace for potential fallout, divorce settlements, child support, and the effect on Lancaster Global Holdings. He had nightmares of losing everything, especially his unborn child, with Isabella. 5 days later, Linda Winters called to inform Isabella and Robert that the test results were in. They gathered at Friedman and Friedman's sleek conference room on a rainy afternoon. Outside the windows, sheets of rain streaked the glass, a fitting backdrop for the storm inside. Isabella sat clutching a tissue, while Robert gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. On the opposite side of the table, Catherine wore a confident smirk, although her eyes flickered with a hint of apprehension. Bryce Cromwell shuffled papers, occasionally glancing at her. Linda cleared her throat. "The results show that Robert Lancaster is not the father of Catherine Devereux's child." She allowed the statement to sink in. "In fact, the tests confirm that the unborn child's genetic markers do not match Robert's." A stunned silence followed, broken only by the sound of Robert's breath releasing in a shaky sigh. Isabella felt tears fill her eyes, tears of relief, though they also carried the weight of betrayal that her husband had still been unfaithful in some capacity. Catherine's face drained of color, her bravado gone. Bryce Cromwell stiffened mentally, calculating the damage control he'd now have to perform. The truth was finally laid bare. Catherine stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. "This can't be right," she exclaimed, her voice cracking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She snatched at the papers Linda was holding, scanning them as if a second look would change the verdict. But the truth was plain. Robert wasn't her child's father. Bryce Cromwell quietly placed a hand on her shoulder. "Catherine," he began, but she yanked away, glaring at him. "I don't need pity," she spat, turning instead to Robert. Her eyes flashed with desperation. "You told me you loved me. You said we'd be together." The veneer of the confident mistress crumbled, revealing a woman terrified of losing everything. Robert's face hardened. "I made a terrible mistake getting involved with you, but if this baby isn't mine, you have no right to smear our family name." Linda Winters wasted no time. "Ms. Devereux, we can pursue legal action for defamation if you continue these public accusations. You should retract your statements immediately." Catherine threw the papers on the table, her chest heaving as she struggled to maintain control. With no dramatic lines left to hurl, she stormed out of the conference room. The entire saga had shifted in an instant. No longer was Robert the presumed father, and no longer did Catherine hold the trump card she once believed she possessed. In the aftermath of Catherine's abrupt exit, Bryce Cromwell remained behind, mumbling apologies about miscommunication and a breakdown in facts. The truth was, Catherine had lied, or at best deceived herself, about the paternity. Robert, while certainly guilty of an affair, wasn't the father. Linda Winters wasted no time in presenting the next steps: a public statement clearing Robert's name, a formal retraction from Catherine, and potentially a settlement to cover damages the Lancasters had incurred due to negative press. Isabella listened quietly, feeling a tangle of relief and anger. The relief stemmed from knowing her unborn child wouldn't share a father with Catherine's. The anger came from realizing the extent to which her marriage had been jeopardized by the affair. When the meeting adjourned, Isabella and Robert found themselves alone in the hallway. Rain still pounded against the windows, casting shifting shadows across the polished floor. For a moment, they just looked at each other, both grappling with conflicting emotions. Robert reached out, but Isabella stepped back, tears in her eyes. "You're not off the hook," she whispered. "Even if that child wasn't yours, the betrayal is real." He nodded solemnly. He knew that even the best DNA result couldn't erase his betrayal or heal Isabella's emotional scars. News spread quickly. Friedman and Friedman issued a succinct statement. "Independent DNA tests confirm Mr. Robert Lancaster is not the father of Ms. Catherine Devereux's unborn child. We expect a public retraction from Ms. Devereux." The media frenzy took a sharp turn. Tabloids now labeled Catherine as the runaway liar, fueling a new wave of public scorn. Robert, meanwhile, discovered a new concern: a family medical condition. In a follow-up appointment for Isabella's prenatal care, doctors found genetic markers indicating the possibility of a rare blood disorder that ran in the Lancaster lineage, something his father had mentioned in passing but never fully disclosed. Isabella needed close monitoring, as the baby could inherit a predisposition. This revelation overshadowed even the news that Robert wasn't Catherine's baby's father. Isabella realized that she and Robert needed to work together to ensure their child's health, perhaps traveling to specialized clinics or seeking advanced prenatal treatments. Despite her anger, Isabella faced a choice: sever ties with Robert and manage the pregnancy alone, or attempt some form of reconciliation for the sake of their child's health. In a somber conversation that night, she told Robert, "Whatever happens between us, our baby comes first. If we can cooperate for that, I'm willing to try." In a last-ditch effort to salvage her reputation and maybe regain some control, Catherine tried to blackmail Robert. She threatened to leak private messages, photos, and even falsified documents that implied financial misconduct at Lancaster Global Holdings. She reached out to him directly, demanding a hefty sum to keep silent. But Robert, now fortified by the DNA results, refused to be intimidated. He forwarded her threats to Friedman and Friedman, who swiftly sent cease and desist letters. Within days, Catherine found herself cornered legally. Bryce Cromwell, realizing his client's position was untenable, attempted to negotiate a smaller settlement, but Linda Winters declined. "We will not reward extortion," she stated firmly. Seeing her options vanish, Catherine made a tearful public apology on a daytime talk show. "I believed wholeheartedly that the baby was Robert's," she claimed, conveniently leaving out key details. She asked for compassion and forgiveness, but the public mood had turned sour. Instead of sympathy, she faced ridicule and condemnation. Her modeling gigs dried up, and she became persona non grata in social circles that once welcomed her. Robert, for his part, felt no triumph in her downfall. He'd made grave mistakes. For him, the real victory would be saving his marriage and welcoming his child into a stable home. Robert attempted to recalibrate his public image with a series of philanthropic actions. He donated a sizable sum to the pediatric wing at Mount Sinai, attended fundraisers for mental health awareness, and even joined a local soup kitchen initiative. The public relations strategy was simple shift focus from scandal to charity. Media outlets picked up on his gestures, though some cynics labeled it as damage control. One high-profile event was a gala benefiting the Gates Foundation's global health initiatives. Isabella accompanied him, her baby bump visible beneath a flowing emerald gown. Despite the tension between them, they presented a united front that night. Cameras flashed, capturing the Lancasters smiling cordially, though Isabella's eyes betrayed caution. Among the gala's attendees was Mark Cuban, who observed them with polite neutrality. Robert approached him, trying to rekindle previous business collaborations. Mark listened politely, but maintained a measured distance, illustrating the reputational toll Robert's affair had exacted. Still, the evening went smoothly, without a single mention of Catherine or scandal. Isabella even managed to chat amiably with other guests, reminding herself that she was part of the philanthropic community first and foremost. She felt a sense of pride that despite personal turmoil, she could still stand strong for causes that mattered. A week later, as Isabella continued her prenatal appointments, another ghost from her past arrived unannounced, her former fiancé, James Caldwell. He had heard the rumors swirling through Manhattan's elite circles and decided to check on her in person. He waited outside Cedars Sinai, dressed casually in a navy peacoat and jeans, looking more grounded than most of the people Isabella now encountered in her high society world. Bella, he called gently, using the old nickname he hadn't uttered in years. His voice stopped her mid-step. Lucy, walking beside her, turned protectively, but Isabella waved her off, her eyes locking with James's in a moment of stunned recognition. They found a quiet corner of a nearby cafe, tucked between ivy-covered brownstones, the same kind of place they used to dream about opening together when life was still simple. Over steaming mugs of cappuccino, James leaned in. "I know we ended things a long time ago, and I don't expect anything. But I couldn't stay silent watching all this unfold. I just wanted to see you, to make sure you're okay." His words were gentle, but the emotional undercurrent was powerful. Isabella hadn't realized how much she needed a safe, familiar presence, someone who'd known her before the Lancasters, before the spotlight, before the betrayal. "I appreciate you coming," she said, her voice low. "It's been surreal, exhausting." James nodded, his expression clouded with concern. "I saw that press conference and the posts. I can't even imagine what you're going through." For a moment, she let herself remember the life they almost had together. James had proposed during a weekend in Vermont after a hike near Lake Champlain. Back then, her dreams had been smaller: open a bookstore, write essays, maybe teach at a university. But ambition and love had led her elsewhere. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't walked away?" she asked quietly. James smiled sadly. "All the time. But I don't regret you chasing what you thought you wanted. You deserve the world, Bella. Still do." There was a beat of silence before he added, "If you ever need someone outside of all this, someone real, I'm a phone call away." She wanted to hug him, thank him. But she was also 7 months pregnant with another man's child, her marriage hanging by a thread. She simply said, "Thank you, James. That means more than you know." After he left, Lucy sat down across from her, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "That was him, wasn't it? The ex-fiancé?" Isabella nodded, still holding her warm mug like an anchor. "He hasn't changed much." Lucy raised an eyebrow. "And how do you feel?" "I don't know," Isabella admitted. "He's kind, familiar. He represents a version of myself I sometimes miss." Lucy leaned in. but he's also the past. You have a future to build either with Robert or on your own. James is a nice echo, but you're not living in echoes anymore. Isabella exhaled. Lucy was right. The visit had stirred up emotions she hadn't prepared for, but it was clarity she needed. Still, the universe had one more twist in store. The next morning, she received a hand-delivered envelope at the penthouse. No return address. Inside was a grainy photo. At first, she thought it was a mistake, some tabloid clipping slipped in the wrong mailbox, but then her breath caught. The photo was of her and James at the cafe the day before, sitting close, smiling. On the back, written in red ink, were the words, "Everyone's watching. Don't forget it." Chills ran down her spine. Was it Catherine, one of her online followers? A paparazzo playing psychological games? She immediately called Lucy, who raced over and took the envelope with gloved hands. "We'll report this," Lucy said calmly. "But you need to be careful. This isn't just scandal anymore, it's veering into obsession." That night, Isabella double-checked all the penthouse's locks. Her world, already shaken, now felt exposed in a new and unsettling way, and yet even as fear crept in, so did a firmer resolve. She placed a hand on her belly and whispered, "I'll protect you, no matter who's watching." Because this battle wasn't just about truth anymore, it was about control, safety, and reclaiming her life from every shadow that tried to invade it. The day of the final legal confrontation arrived with heavy skies and a biting chill in the air, as though the world itself understood the weight of what was about to unfold. Friedman and Friedman had filed a civil suit for defamation, emotional distress, and reputational damage against Catherine Devereux. The hearing was scheduled at a discreet New York courthouse, chosen specifically to avoid the media frenzy that had plagued the past weeks. Catherine arrived first, dressed in a charcoal gray pantsuit, far more conservative than her usual designer flamboyance. Her once defiant posture had wilted. She moved with visible fatigue, her face pale beneath her makeup. The mistress who had once ruled the headlines, with a smirk and a hashtag, now looked more like a defendant grasping for dignity. Isabella arrived next, flanked by Lucy and Linda Winters. She wore a tailored navy maternity dress, her baby bump prominent beneath the fabric. She didn't speak much as they made their way inside, but her eyes scanned the hallway with quiet steel. It had taken everything, tears, strength, strategy, and heartbreak to get to this point, and now she would not flinch. Robert came separately, dressed in a somber black suit. He sat near Isabella, but not beside her. The emotional distance between them remained, even if they now fought on the same side of the courtroom. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Dolores Manning, entered the courtroom briskly and took her seat. Known for her no-nonsense demeanor and deep experience in high-profile cases, she wasted no time. "Let's begin," she said, her voice firm. Linda Winters stood first. Her presence commanded the room as always. She introduced the case, then detailed how Catherine's false public claims, bolstered by social media posts, television appearances, and threatening private messages, had caused unquantifiable damage to Isabella's mental health, endangered her pregnancy, and jeopardized Robert Lancaster's professional relationships and financial standing. A dramatic moment came when Linda read aloud the threatening note Isabella had received after meeting with James Caldwell. "Everyone's watching," she quoted, holding up the envelope for the judge. While the sender remains unidentified, the connection to Ms. Devereux's pattern of provocation and harassment cannot be ignored. Then, Robert was called to the stand. His voice was steady but remorseful. "I take full responsibility for my poor judgment," he said. "But the claims Catherine made extended far beyond personal indiscretion. They incited a media wildfire that endangered my wife's health and my company's reputation. And the child we're expecting, he or she, doesn't deserve to be born into chaos. Isabella did not testify. Linda had advised that her presence, especially in the late stages of pregnancy, would speak louder than words. She sat quietly, occasionally reaching for Lucy's hand when her heart pounded too hard. When it was Catherine's turn, she looked smaller than she ever had. Her attorney, Bryce Cromwell, offered a restrained defense that Catherine had acted based on what she genuinely believed at the time, that she was emotionally vulnerable and that the DNA results were as shocking to her as they were to the world. Catherine rose to offer a personal statement. Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean for things to spiral like this. I really thought Robert was the father. When I found out he wasn't, I was devastated, not because of fame or fortune, but because I felt abandoned." Judge Manning leaned forward. "Ms. Devereaux, while emotional pain is understandable, your actions weren't just misguided, they were malicious. You made claims without medical verification, monetized them through media appearances, and smeared reputations. That is not merely a mistake, that is a calculated attack." The courtroom was silent. After a brief recess, Judge Manning returned with the verdict. Catherine would be ordered to pay a substantial settlement for defamation and emotional distress. The court would also require her to issue a formal public retraction within 48 hours to be posted on the same platforms where the original claims had been made. As the gavel struck, Isabella let out a long, quiet breath. It didn't bring joy, but it brought closure. Outside the courtroom, Robert approached her tentatively. "Thank you for being here," he said softly. She looked at him, her eyes glassy but calm. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for the truth, and for our child." Then she turned to Lucy and walked away, leaving Robert standing in the cold shadow of the courthouse's marble columns. Some battles were won in silence, others in strength. Isabella had learned how to wield both. The grand mansion, once a symbol of romance and status, now felt like neutral ground, a place where the past had happened, but the future had yet to be written. Robert welcomed her back with visible relief, but she made her expectations crystal clear. "I'm not moving back as your wife," she told him the first evening, standing in the foyer with her suitcase still by the door. "I am moving back as the mother of your child. If this marriage has any hope, it begins with honesty, absolute, unfiltered honesty." Robert nodded. No more secrets, no more locked phones, no more pretending. He had already cancelled his international business travel, reassigned meetings to trusted deputies, and adjusted his schedule to accommodate every prenatal appointment. His once meticulously packed itinerary was now dominated by doctor visits, therapy sessions, and evening dinners with Isabella. No assistance, no phones, no distractions. The couple began counseling with Dr. Hallstein, a renowned Manhattan therapist known for working with public figures in crisis. The sessions were raw and often painful. Robert was forced to confront the emotional fallout of his betrayal, not just the affair itself, but the erosion of safety, dignity, and self-worth Isabella had suffered. "You didn't just cheat," Isabella told him during one particularly intense session. "You gambled with my body, my pregnancy, my peace of mind. And you did it for..." What? A thrill. Robert didn't try to defend himself. He'd spent weeks preparing to own every word, every action. "I was selfish," he said, "and I was weak. But I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to watch me earn your trust again." Some nights were quieter than others. Isabella would retreat to the solarium after dinner, cradling her belly, reading baby development books, or writing notes for the child's future memory box. Robert would sit a few feet away sometimes, sketching out ideas for a children's room or researching newborn health articles. He knew he couldn't buy his way out of this, so he offered something rare at time presence, vulnerability. One day, Isabella walked into the nursery he'd started to renovate on his own. Gone, were the cold designer elements. In their place were warm earth tones, soft lighting, and a hand-painted mural of a night sky filled with constellations. A folded card sat on the windowsill. It read, "I hope this is the beginning of our healing, not just for us, but for the little one who deserves a peaceful world to arrive into." She felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a softening. Outside the home, the Lancaster name was still recovering. The scandal had died down, replaced by fresher headlines, but the family's philanthropic work continued. Isabella, ever poised, began participating again, this time with a voice of her own. She hosted a roundtable for maternal health awareness and spoke at a fundraising event for mental wellness among pregnant women. "I know what it feels like to have your world collapse while carrying another life," she told a small audience. But resilience isn't built in comfort. It's built in the moments you choose to keep going. She was applauded not just for her composure, but for her honesty. Meanwhile, Catherine's public retraction went live. A sterile, overly formal post appeared on her Instagram stating that she regretted any confusion caused and acknowledged the outcome of a legal process that had clarified all relevant facts. Comments were limited. Followers dropped away. Endorsement deals vanished. She became a cautionary tale, whispered behind closed doors. Back at the estate one evening, near the end of her 8th month, Isabella sat in the garden with Robert. The spring air was warm. Fireflies blinked in the hedges. She stared at the stars overhead and spoke without turning to him. "I don't know what the future looks like for us," she admitted. "I'm still angry, still hurt. But I'm not numb anymore." Robert reached over slowly, his hand brushing hers. "You don't have to promise me tomorrow," he whispered. "Just let me be here for today." And for the first time in months, Isabella didn't pull away. They sat there in silence, two broken people trying to heal not just themselves, but each other, for the sake of the child who would soon change everything. And so the Lancaster family emerged from a scandal that nearly toppled its century-old legacy. The DNA test revealed shocking truths, but also spurred a journey of introspection and healing. Catherine Devereux retreated into obscurity, her ambitions undone by lies. Robert and Isabella, though scarred, chose a path of honesty therapy and steadfast devotion to the child who would soon enter their world. Their story reminds us that appearances can crumble in an instant, but sometimes the harsh light of truth can illuminate a new way forward. If you've been captivated by this tale, by the twists, the tears, and the triumph of finding purpose amid chaos, don't let the journey end here. Like, share, and subscribe to continue exploring stories that peel back the layers of human nature. Let's keep uncovering the complexities of the heart together. Your support helps bring more powerful narratives to light, and we can't wait to share them with you. Thank you for listening.